1, 2, 3. We got it right this time. Clapped in sync.
I was thinking 3, 2, 1. You did 1, 2, 3, but we still got it done.
How you going, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Good to be back on your channel this time around.
I think we need to have a chat, though. I thought what we had was special. How do you think I felt when I saw you frolicking across the desert with someone else? I saw you sleeping under the stars and I saw all these shots.
Ooh.
And to make it worse, they don't even shoot Canon. What's going on?
Well, as you know, I was hoping you wouldn't find out, but it's hard these days. But we used to do this trip, the three of us actually,
Yes.
and now you kind of withdrew yourself a little bit, so I'll have to be without you in the field from time to time. But no, hopefully down the track we can do all of those trips together again as well. That would definitely be fun.
But that sort of brings me on to the chat today. I want to chat about your trip. I want to know all about it, and I want to ask you some questions that I think the audience would want to know. So I guess the first thing is I'm curious about is how did you pack and what gear did you take? Did you have any issues getting on the plane? Like what bag did you use? Let's start there.
Well, I was pretty worried about all the stuff because normally I drive to these trips, but this time I was meeting our friend Gerard in Sydney. So I had to fly from the Sunshine Coast to Sydney, and this is not very big planes either. And I ended up booking a business class seat because that was almost the same price and included 232 kilograms checked bags. And then normally you can have one backpack and another piece of bag with you as well. And if you fly economy, they'd kind of be mean to you. And if you fly business, they're like, oh, hi, Jan, welcome. Can we carry your bag for you? So it's definitely quite a different experience. Someone else recommended to me, if you're on a cheap airline especially, you could also book a second seat for your backpack if
Sure.
you have like a really heavy backpack, and then you can basically take as much as you want with you. So normally when I travel, I just take my Naya Evo 60 liter Fjord backpack with me that fits my 600 and then a couple cameras. And then my biggest problem is that you can't put any batteries anymore into your suitcase. So I literally have like 5 kilos worth of batteries in my carry-on, all the camera batteries and all the drone batteries.
Yeah.
And so you're already over the limit just because they force you to actually put it all into your carry-on. It's just kind of annoying to rock up somewhere with a backpack that weighs like 22 kilos because then it's kind of hard to argue. But if you keep it in that sort of 10 to 12 kilo range, you might be getting away with it, especially if you have like a second seat or fly business or something.
Yeah, that's some good advice. I remember I went to New Zealand and I had like 16 kilos in my, when I went to the sub-Antarctic, and I got very lucky getting through, but subsequently I've been caught out. I went on one trip and they made me take the gear out, put it in the check luggage. And the cheaper airlines in Australia, I don't know what the rest of the world is, but they weigh you at when you're getting boarding.
One more thing on that, I actually heard that they're paying the gate agent like a bounty for people that they find with too heavy carry-on. So
Right.
it's actually really the airlines kind of working against you, which I found very disappointing because it puts people in a difficult position. If you have a lot of things that you can't check, you're not allowed to check your batteries. Like, what are you meant to do?
Yeah, that's right. All right, so you obviously made it to our friend's place, and he's driven you guys to South Australia. Let's start with the struggles during the trip.
Well, the biggest struggle was obviously that I now live in southeast Queensland, and even in winter it's nice and warm, so I packed a lot of shorts and everything. And then the first night we spent near Canberra, it's like -2 degrees, and I was definitely not prepared for like fully freezing temperatures.
Right.
So I had to, luckily I remembered that it kind of gets cold in winter in the south. So I put a couple thermals in my pack and one jumper and like a few pairs of sweatpants. So I had to wear everything I had with me the first night, and was still sleeping in the sleeping bag with a beanie on.
Oh, right.
So I was definitely a little bit underprepared in terms of the weather. And the weather was actually the biggest challenge throughout the trip as well, because there's just like a low sort of coming through, like an Arctic low. So it was very windy. Never seen this many rainbows in my life. Like there was days where you'd see like 15 rainbows around you in like all directions, because we were going to the Nullarbor Desert. So it's completely flat, no trees, right at the ocean. So you can see literally for hundreds of kilometers, and you have all these like little shower cells coming through, and every shower cell has like 1 or 2 rainbows from like the sun hitting the clouds and stuff. So it was pretty crazy. And then obviously with bird photography, rain is annoying, but what's really bad is heavy wind, and we had a lot of that as well. And there's no trees, no cover for the birds really, and often they're sitting on like little bushes. So not ideal, but we still managed in the end.
I guess one thing with wind is a tip we could let people know. If you've got a large lens and you're shooting and it's really windy, you can take the lens hood off, because the lens hood often acts as a giant sail which blows you around and makes it quite hard. So I assume you took the lens hood off in the really strong wind.
I definitely did that in certain situations, but it was so bad at times when I was using the 600mm lens with the teleconverters and handheld. Sometimes I could almost not keep my subject in the viewfinder because the wind was just pushing my lens so much around. And then sometimes I find that the image stabilization can actually work against you as well, because it kind of tries to stabilize it, but then your lens moves and it's almost like your picture has like a slight delay of what you're seeing, or you're pointing it this way, but your actual viewfinder is sort of down the other way. So definitely not easy. And whenever I could, I tried to rest it on my knee or lean against a tree to actually get it a little bit more stable. You could use a tripod, but in this sort of environment where the birds sometimes sit high up, then they sit on the ground, then they run around you, it's very hard to actually use a tripod. So I was basically shooting handheld the whole trip.
People aren't aware, the Nullarbor is like one of the longest roads in the world. Like you say, there's not a lot of bush there. So how did you even find these parrots?
Well, obviously, with a trip like this or any trip, good research is needed, because there's a few birds like the Nullarbor quail thrush that only lives in the area. There's the Naretha bluebonnet parrots. And if you know where to look, eBird, Facebook, Instagram, collect information over the years, you'll definitely find these spots, and especially eBird is quite interesting. And there's actually another page I found recently. What is it called? birdingplaces.eu or something. It's mainly for Europe, but they have a few places in the rest of the world as well. So there's some interesting information out there. And what I always do before a trip, or on this trip, I didn't even know always where we would go. So I had a Starlink with me as well. And then sometimes at night I'm sitting on my phone trying to look for the next locations that we can visit.
Now, one thing I want to talk about, and you shared with me about your trip, you had one major frustration throughout the trip. And maybe we could put a photo up on the screen just to demonstrate what you went through. We'll give people a clue. You had sore fingers after the shoot, didn't you? After the trip.
I still have like sort of worn out skin on my fingers. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, from using the manual focus ring so much. And I think this is another reason why I was hand holding as well, because then I could have my hand directly on the manual focus ring and adjust the focus.
Why are you using a manual focus ring?
Ideally, I wouldn't want to, but it was definitely very difficult hand holding. Sometimes in the strong wind with birds that are often close to the ground, or sometimes obstructed by grass in the foreground and the background. So one of the big frustrations during this trip was definitely just the autofocus not wanting to either jump onto the target or just jumping off the target when you're already on it, and then jumping onto grass in the foreground. Or I think everyone will experience this. You're on your subject and suddenly your focus is sort of wiggling away towards you and you're like, what are you doing? And normally this always seems to happen when the bird's doing like the best pose, like the camera is just on the bird, it's feeding, it's not doing anything. Then it goes upright, makes a nice pose, and your focus goes like,
yeah.
So definitely frustrating. And the only really workaround I found was to keep the camera honest with the manual focus, basically trying to keep that close to the bird. But then interestingly, I still found that the eye-tracking autofocus was then the most accurate, or the second most accurate. And then, other times I was just trying to use the spot autofocus. And then when I use the spot autofocus, I often try to make it easier for it, especially if a bird is in the grass, by focusing then on the bird's body rather than trying to hit the eye or the head. And if you're sort of parallel to the bird, the head should still be within the depth of field as well. So definitely not easy, quite frustrating, but with a little bit of tweaking, you still were able to get some photos at least.
It's an interesting thing. And like you say, I think just about everybody who shoots mirrorless has had this frustration. For me personally, it's not just the Canon, like you were shooting with the R5 II and the 600 f4.
It's every single one of them, really.
Like just about
grass in particular.
What I want is, I'm in bird mode, so I've told the camera I'm looking for a bird. The camera is looking for a bird. I can see a bird through the viewfinder, or I can see it in front of me. And if I engage autofocus, my expectation is that the autofocus will find that bird. It does it right the majority of the time, but why would it focus on grass or a branch? Because in my mind, that is clearly not a bird. So I want the AI and the camera or the technology to go, they're looking at a bird, they want to focus on a bird. I'm not going to stop focusing until I find that bird. Maybe it will just never find it, and that would be frustrating as well. But I don't want it to focus on a branch or a background. And it's just very, very annoying. And I don't know why they can't figure it out. It's just very frustrating. And like you say, there's a few ways around it. The manual focus ring to pull focus. So you can do the focus limit to reduce how much it's looking, but then you can also set the focus distance
Or
on
like
a
a
button.
recall
That's it.
or something.
So you can have a recall to pull it back towards you and then focus again. But there's just nothing worse. Sometimes it's even in a burst of shots. Like I showed in my recent Nikon Z5 II review that the autofocus was on the subject, and I'm holding down the AF on, and for whatever reason, like you said, it's come forward towards me all on its own. Like it was on the subject. So if you're on the bird, stay on the bird. So the stickiness is an issue. And I think we talked about it before, that if you hold down the AF on button, the camera almost gets agitated by and it wants to go looking elsewhere. And I know some people are saying now that they pump the autofocus. I'm not sure if you do that, but some people are saying just to pump the autofocus a bit to try and keep it on the subject. I think the narrower depth of field, like your 600 f4, even makes it more of a challenge because the camera's struggling to see through that out of focus area. And like when I shoot on micro four thirds, because it's got much bigger depth of field, it doesn't seem to be quite as bad. It still does it, but it's got, with bird and flight in particular, it can just see it, because I think the camera needs to be able to see it to focus on it, and when it's out of focus, it just can't see it. So yeah, it is a massive frustration.
The more depth of field you have as well, the more leeway the autofocus has as well. If you're shooting at f2.8, it has to really hit the spot for the head to be in focus. Whereas if you're like f13, you can probably hit the wing and your head's still in focus, especially at a greater distance as well. That makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, pumping your focus or not focusing too long is definitely something I mentioned in a video a couple of months ago as well, where I talked about autofocus. And I definitely noticed that in particular with the newer cameras like the Sonys or the R5 Mark II, especially, is if you focus for like longer than 5, 6, 10 seconds, it almost always wanders off your target. It just can't stay on your target for that long. So it's usually better to just do shorter bursts that seems to give you a bit more accuracy, especially if you don't know if the bird will do anything. It's better to just let the camera rest without focusing and then engage the focusing just before you shoot again.
Yeah, I'd love to hear in the comments from people, have you experienced these autofocus issues on your mirrorless bodies, getting sidetracked by branches? What autofocus settings are you using on your camera? Have you got any tips that are helping you out? I think it's just important that we do share the autofocus issues that you have, because we clearly only see the sharpest and the best photos when we're looking online. We don't see all the out of focus images because they just end up being deleted. Rest assured that even the best are getting plenty of out of focus shots and getting frustrated as well. And hopefully in the future it will improve. I guess my question is, did you try the R1 or are you using mainly the R5 II whilst you're out there?
I tried that one a couple times, but the challenge on this trip was definitely small birds, large distances, and most of the time I was using the 1.4 or a lot of times actually the 2 times extender. And when you know that the bird's small and you have to crop a lot, then your natural reaction is always to grab the camera with the higher megapixels. So in a few situations where I knew the birds would be a little bit closer, like the ground parrot or the major Mitchell cockatoos, I also used the R1. But in most other situations, it just felt like it is much safer for me to use the R5 Mark II, just because I have more scope. If like one of those nullarbor quail threshers that was so hard to see, like it was actually a weird bird. There was a lot of birds around, but the typical occasion would be you walk through the salt bush, it sees you, it flies away like 100 meters. So no. Very frustrating bird. So if you actually get close enough to one to get a photo, you kind of don't, or it's still a little bit too far away, but you can at least see it and get a shot. Then you want to be able to crop enough to get like a decent sized bird in the frame. Whereas if it's still far away and then you're using 24 megapixels, it does limit you a lot more in terms of the ability to crop. And I think we have to differentiate here. Obviously 24 megapixels itself is great, but if you have both cameras sitting on the car seat next to you and you know you probably have to crop, then which one you pick is an easy choice, even though I would have preferred to use the R1 more because it would give me better video and a little bit better overall autofocusing performance. But then at the same time, what I've been saying with that camera is all along is it's really good despite the 24 megapixels. So sometimes when you know you have to crop, having more megapixels is obviously a very important choice.
It's a very interesting topic. Basically what you're saying is focal length and megapixels are important when you have to crop a lot and you can't get close to the subject. Clearly, if you can get close to the subject and fill the frame, 24 is more than enough. But in those circumstances, it can be a struggle. And it is a hot topic, isn't it, about megapixels and tele converters. And there's plenty of videos out there. But my personal experience, we have a very famous busted here nearby to me at the moment. I don't know if you've heard about it. There's a bird that shouldn't be in my area that's turned up, and they're usually in your neck of the woods up in Queensland. And this bird is turned up and it's on a farmer's paddock. So it's on private property and it's in the middle of a paddock, and there's lots of people going to see it. And I thought, I'll go and try and photograph it. So the first time I went there, I took the Z52 and the 180 to 600. So I had 600 millimeters and 24 megapixels. And because I couldn't get over this fence, I was restricted with how much reach I had, and the bird didn't really come all that close, and the shots weren't very good. The bird was just too small and I couldn't really get good detail. So I thought, I'll go back again, but next time I'm going to take the R5 Mark II, 45 megapixels, the 200 to 800 and a 1.4 converter. That's quite a lot of focal length. So I went there and thankfully the bird came a bit closer, but I was able to get some really nice images, which I'll share on the screen, of this bird purely because I had all those megapixels and all that reach. I was lucky that I had the light to be able to shoot at the high aperture, but it definitely assisted me, and I wouldn't have got those shots otherwise. So if I'd only had 500 millimeters on 24 megapixels, I don't think I would have had the same sort of image. And I even managed to crop heavily for this headshot of this bird. And speaking of birds which you got, which I am absolutely amazed by, is you got a ground parrot. So if people aren't aware, these birds are usually very, very tricky to find. And I was so happy that you got those. And I must admit, I had a tinge of jealousy. I'm going, oh, I need to go there. I need to photograph this bird. But I lived through you guys. But what's interesting is I'd like you to share probably a little bit around, I guess, luck and persistence and how you came about getting that ground parrot. Like, let us know how you got that bird, considering that usually you can't photograph them.
And it's really ironic that it's very close to where you used to live, isn't it?
Literally half an hour's drive.
So that comes back down to doing preparation or finding spots or knowing that something is there. You lived there for years, half an hour away, but you didn't know they were there, so you never went there. So it's really one of those things, finding out. Or again, about these birds, you kind of find out on social media. You see one person post something, another person posts something, then a third person posts something, and then you're like, that doesn't feel like so only like luck anymore, basically. Right. There has to be something going on here.
Yep.
And then you try to find out more, and then you go there, and at first, I'm like, there's no way we'll see any of those birds here. Because Gerard went there a little while ago and he's like, oh, on the first few meters, I already had like one or two birds. We walked there for like 2 hours, didn't see anything. And then suddenly we did actually find one of the birds that was kind of climbing out of the tall grass onto the edge of the road. Because there seems to be one specific kind of grass that they're feeding on.
Right.
And I don't know what it is. If one of you guys know, let us know in the comments. Is this kind of long grass that has these sort of almost like a Y shape or V shape at the top, and it has tiny grass seeds. And the amazing thing is these parrots then grab it and almost like suck all the seeds off that little grass stem. Wow. Again, with them, it's just a matter of hoping it walks out into somewhere open and position yourself in a way where you think, if it just walked out another 20 centimeters to the left, I can get a shot. So I think it's a bit of both. Here, it's obviously luck, finding the bird in the right spot at the right time.
Yep.
But then it's also positioning yourself in a spot that you can get lucky, essentially. Like if you just shoot straight at the bird that's in the grass, you probably can't really get a good shot. So you have to try and line yourself up maybe with a background. That's what really helps. And it's cloudy, for instance, as well, because then you're not so restricted where you can stand.
Yep.
And so then it was really just all about kind of walking around the bird. And then it's also just working your autofocus, because green birds in the green grass with lots of sticks everywhere, definitely not fun. Like the amount of autofocus images I got there was just insane.
Yeah.
But there I was basically staying on the bird with the manual focus the whole time. And whenever I wanted to take a photo, I pressed the eye tracking, and then most of the time I would stay on it, but it was still a challenge. But then you also have to take the opportunities when they arise, because the first day the weather wasn't ideal, but that turned out to be the only time that we actually found the birds, because we spent another day or two there, never saw them again. So it's really just 20 minutes one afternoon where you had that magical moment and then it all disappeared as quickly as it came, basically.
I think we can all relate to that. So I've seen a couple of interesting videos on your channel. The one that caught my eye was your HTP, highlight tone priority. What the heck is that? Is this some brand new feature that Canon have come out with? Why are you using it? What's going on?
I was in a particular situation where for the first time ever I was photographing these western yellow robins. And these birds were kind of in mottled light. They have very bright yellow bellies. And whenever the sun hit the belly, it was just blowing out completely. So my only option then was to completely underexpose the image. But I just ended up with completely dark files with such dark faces where it was almost, it felt like impossible to recover the shadows. And that's where I remembered what my friend said. Try the highlight tone priority, will stop you from blowing out the highlights. And so I went to the menu, turned it on, took another photo. The bird was nice enough to just sit there in front of me, letting me test.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, holy moly, this seems to work really well.
Right.
And so seemingly what the camera seems to do is it underexposes your files and then use a tone curve within the camera to bring back the shadows and the dark areas and leaves the highlights in that sort of darker exposure. So you're basically not able to blow out the highlights anymore at all. And you still end up with a really nice and balanced exposure. And I found that to be really useful because now something that would take a lot of editing to balance out a dark underexposed image, now the camera can basically do for you. You just have to remember that only certain programs seem to be able to read that out because the camera bakes some of this into the raw file, obviously the underexposure, but then the tone curve that it applies to it is only tagged in the metadata of the file. So Adobe, for instance, or Canon DPP can read out the metadata. So it gives you a beautiful file. If you open that up in Lightroom, it looks exactly like on the back of the camera. But if you're using other programs, for instance, DxO Photolab, it's not able to read out the metadata and you will suddenly end up with a really dark raw file. For me, I found it amazing because I could expose much brighter and I was basically not able to blow out the highlights within reason. Of course, if you overexpose by 5 stops, you're still going to blow it out. But if you're in that sort of 1-stop range, you get a balanced photo with no blown out highlights throughout the whole image. And of course, this is something I could do during the editing process as well. Underexpose all my images and then brighten them. But I find that a lot more tedious and harder to do than having it perfectly done within camera, basically.
Ultimately, it's saving you quite a bit of time because before you had to do exactly what you said. For me, sometimes I'd have to do 2 exposures and blend them, like do one for the whites and then do one for the darks, blend them, and it was just a lot of editing, whereas this one sort of does it for you. It just saves you time, and it's also a backup there just in case, because many of us get exposure wrong. I know I do. You probably don't get exposure that wrong. But
no, not at all.
But it's just nice to have, I suppose. What do we do if we don't shoot Canon? What do we do if we shoot Sony or Nikon or Olympus? I know for me, on my Sony and Olympus, they do have zebras in stills, which is really good. What that means is just if you put it on, if you start blowing your whites, they get this weird zebra pattern. So you can just use that to guide you, but you will still end up underexposing and having to adjust, but it will save you blowing your whites. And what did Nikon have? I can't remember. They've got something, haven't they?
See, the advantage on the Canon would basically be you could have the zebras showing. You take the photo, but that area wouldn't be blown out because you're using the highlight tone priority.
Right.
So it basically gives you that extra buffer. On Sony, as far as I know, it's only available in JPEG. I think it's like Dynamic Range Optimizer.
Okay.
Nikon has something called Active D-Lighting, but I think it will only work properly if you're using the Nikon software to process the raw files.
Okay.
And then they also have highlight weighted metering or something like that. Don't nail me on the wording here, but it essentially is similar. If you're using auto ISO, for instance, the camera will meter for the brightest area in your image and then underexpose accordingly to not blow out the whites. So you're getting part of it, but you're not getting the camera to adjust all the shadows and dark areas for you, so you have one really nice balance file. I think the only other company that actually has a similar or even better implementation to Canon is actually Fuji, that has the same, where it's also baked into the raw files. So if you open those raw files in Adobe, for instance, as far as I know, they will also have that baked in. And I think there it's called something DR200 and DR400 plus or something like that.
Okay.
And that will also give you the same effect. And as we said, of course, you can do that in the editing process yourself, but I just found it really nice in the field. I can expose the way I want, nice and bright,
Yep.
but I'm not blowing the highlights, and I end up with a nice balanced raw file. So in situations where you have highlights in your photo, this is very good.
Well, it sounds interesting, and let us know in the comments if you're using it. What are your thoughts? I've definitely put it on, and I'll be testing it out myself. Speaking of underexposing shots and getting exposure wrong, in our last video, we were talking about editing really old photos that were terrible that we can now edit now because the technology's changed. And so what I did is I went back to one of my really old photos. I went back to 2013, and I think it was the 7D and my 400 5.6. And I think I photographed some glossy blacks for the first time, but I completely stuffed up the exposure. Like, you've seen the raw file. It's almost like dark, and I never...
It's definitely amongst the worst I've ever seen.
We all start somewhere, but I never edited that photo because when I increased the exposure to brighten it, it was so noisy and it was lacking detail, and it was just, I kept it, but I never ever edited that photo. So I thought, why not send you the raw file and see if you can actually bring it back to life. All right, so I set you an almost impossible task, and I'm just looking at it. And if we look at the raw file, you'll see just how dark this is. And
you mean you don't see anything?
That's right. We can hardly tell it's a bird. And I don't know how I did it, but obviously I've underexposed it. I think what probably happened there...
I'm actually surprised you were able to focus on the bird, with it being that dark and that underexposed and everything. That's probably the most impressive of it all.
The background's quite bright because you can see the sky coming through. I think the camera's exposed for those highlights, which has caused everything else to go badly underexposed.
Slightly under.
But anyway, I might get you just to say how you've edited yours, because obviously when I look at your final image, it's hard to believe that that came from that raw file. Like, we never used to be able to do that. It's kind of staggering, to be honest, that you can actually edit that. And there's obviously been some changes, recent ones in Lightroom that you might mention. But yeah, talk me through what you did with it.
I think obviously the biggest challenge here, it's super dark, so you can't see anything. So my first step would be brighten it like crazy, probably 2 stops at least, so you can even see what you're doing. Before that, there's no point doing anything else. Then I used one of my pro sets to get the colors a little bit more right. I think the Vibrant More Contrast one. That tweaked it a little bit. But from there, I really needed to fix the white balance that's completely off.
Yeah.
And I actually found that difficult because these birds tend to go really magenta-y or red really quickly.
Yes.
So if you add the magenta to get the green out of it, it also makes the bird kind of red.
Yeah.
So I had to fiddle around a little bit with that, and I actually went into the color mixer down below as well and tweak the shadows and the midtones there a little bit, trying to get the magenta cast out of the bird, but also making the overall image warmer and not so green.
Yes.
And then I just tried to bring back the highlights in the background a little bit, and it was definitely a challenging image because it looked funny if you darken the background, it looked funny if you brighten the background, so there was not much you could do, and I decided to probably just go for a pretty tight crop, but I actually really like your version as well. And again, it shows that with completely different methods, you can achieve quite a similar result. And I think last time yours was a little bit darker and a little bit warmer, and it seems like this time around mine's a little bit darker and warmer. So now looking at yours, I'd probably go back to mine and just add a slight curve adjustment maybe on the bird. And what I like to do is DxO has that Nik collection with a white neutralizer. I feel like I might want to run that on mine slightly to tweak that a little bit. But I always find that interesting because whenever you edit the same image, you will always find something that you like in the 100%. One photo and that you like in the other photo. And you always feel like, now I want to go back and make just a couple tweaks. Dwayne has one nice thing, I want to have that nice thing as well.
It's funny you mentioned that because the first edit, the glossy back had a lot of an orange cast to it, and it wasn't until I came back and I went, oh, it shouldn't be that reddy color.
So you cheated, that's what you're saying.
No, I just took your advice. I left it for a minute, I came back and saw that it was just too red, and I reduced the reds. How did I do that? I actually just selected the bird and then just reduced it to magenta, I think, or some of the reds. So obviously Lightroom had a recent update when it comes to their AI denoise. They've also got raw details. Did you notice that? I'm not sure exactly what that does, but just underneath
but you can't seem to be able to use it with the denoise.
No, it does it automatically.
If you use the denoise, it does it automatically, but if you use the denoise, then you can't upsize resize your image. So there's
That's right.
some sort of little limitation there. But yeah, it seems to just randomly apply to raw details as well. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I'm sure it's just doing some other AI thing.
It's actually a really good improvement now because we can do that slider quite easily and see the results instantaneously. It's kind of incredible, and then you can adjust that image. So if you haven't updated to the latest version, I highly encourage you, because that denoise is an amazing feature.
And this is actually what I've done on this bird, because black cockatoos in particular, and I've photographed a lot of glossy black cockatoos lately, they lose detail very quickly. High ISO, dark bird.
Yep.
So normally I apply the AI noise reduction at around 50%.
Yep.
But on here I went down to 38 or something because I was losing all the detail in the chest. And so I'm like, I'll rather have a bit more noise and a bit more detail than making it too clean. And so having that slider that you can just slide around was definitely fantastic.
What I might do is I'll make this raw file available for all of you. So in the description below, there'll be a link. You can download it and have an edit yourself and just see if you can come up with something interesting, something similar to Jan and myself, and just have a play. Often I get asked if I use binoculars, and I'm curious, have you ever used them?
I have a pair of binoculars.
Yeah.
And I'm using them so much that one time I left them on my car and then realized a couple 100 kilometers later that I actually left them on the car. So I decided to turn around somewhere in the middle of Western Australia, drove back, found them in the car park.
Wow.
So I still have the same pair. They survived. And I don't know, I like binoculars, but it's another piece of heavy stuff to carry around with me. So I can't say that I use them all the time. Most of the time I just find it a little bit annoying to have them with me. I'm already carrying so much gear. I'm like, where do I put that? But I wouldn't be opposed to using a nice pair of binoculars, but it's not something that I've really focused on.
The reason I ask is I've got a shameless product plug here. Sue-Ray obviously support my channel, and they reached out to me and said, would you be interested in trying our new binoculars? And the reason I said yes is very similar story to yours. I purchased a really nice pair of binoculars way back when, and they cost a lot of money. And I went to the Shoalhaven Heads sort of tidal mudflat, exactly what you were saying. I had them and I saw a bird, and bird brain kicked in. I thought, I'll just put them on the ground. I'll remember where I put them. And I went chasing after this bird, and then half an hour elapsed, and then I looked behind me and the tides come in, and they were now underwater, and I lost them.
So there is a nice pair somewhere in
Someone found it. Someone found them, and I thought, I can't be trusted. Just like sunglasses, I can't be trusted with good sunglasses. So I just buy lots of cheap pairs, and then if I break them or lose them, it doesn't bother me. So I bought a cheaper pair of binoculars, and that's what I've been using up until now. And obviously Sue-Ray sent me these, and honestly the difference is like chalk and cheese. Looking through a quality pair, it was just amazing. And these are really clear. I look at my bird bath, see what's coming to my bird bath, and when I'm driving around I use them. But I have the same issue as you. They just get in the way a lot of the time. So I'm curious what other people's solutions are. Let us know in the comments, what binoculars are you using? But if you're looking for a good pair of binoculars, I can definitely vouch for these.
What's the magnification?
10 by 42.
See, I could see myself probably putting a pair in a glove box in a car or something. I think that's where it would actually be quite useful for me. Or in the sort of middle compartment, if I'm just driving around, I quickly see something, I can have a look. That's probably where I could actually put my pair, or maybe I should get myself a new pair, because over the years, just sitting in the backpack, it has gotten slightly scratched, and I guess falling off the car a few times hasn't really helped.
No, it definitely doesn't help at all. I think this brings us to the end of this chat, Jan. It's been awesome. I always like hanging out, and I look forward to the next chat on your channel next time. Of course, leave us some comments below. We'd love to read those comments and reply. But until the next one, thanks for coming along, and happy birding, and take care.
Yep. See you soon. And of course, hit that subscribe button.
See ya.
See ya.